This is TWiT.
A passenger on a flight from New York to Dallas sent a thread of tweets about an overheard conversation of a couple seated near her. The story went viral and started out heartfelt, but ended like so many things end on Twitter these days as a cautionary tale about privacy in public spaces with the hashtag #PlaneBay.
PlaneBay.
Dr. Sandra Davidson is here. She's a communications law expert at the University of Missouri, an expert in privacy law and the media. Thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Davidson.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
So when you first heard of the hashtag #PlaneBay story, what were your first thoughts about this?
Well, we are in such a new situation with technology, just rampant. You know, the notion of when do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy keeps shrinking and shrinking as technology keeps leaping forward. So you just have to beware. What can we say?
So what about, what expectation do I have? I guess, what legal expectation do I have of privacy on an airplane?
The reasonable expectation of privacy is the highest when you're in your home or your office. It's at its lowest when you're out on a public street, someplace like that, where anybody can be walking by and seeing you. When you are in a plane, or let's say you're at your workplace, and there are other people around, here's the question. A reasonable expectation of privacy, does it exist? Well, not concerning the people who are around you. They can see you, they can hear you, but the question becomes, what about a reasonable expectation of privacy concerning the rest of the world? And we had an interesting case in California. It ended up ending in 2000, but here was the situation. Some psychics, air quotes, were talking about their psychic network and saying basically it was a bunch of hogwash. They did not know that the person sitting next to them had been hired, but she was actually an ABC reporter. Now, if they'd been a psychic, really, they would have known that they were, yeah. So here's what happened. One of the psychics, when this broadcast went nationwide, fell off the wagon. He was a recovering alcoholic. He died. But the other one lived to sue and collect. The jury came back with a $1.2 million judgment. The California Supreme Court said, well, we will say that if you do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy concerning the people around you, it may still be a question of whether you have a reasonable expectation of privacy concerning the rest of the world. And it doesn't make any difference if we're talking about broadcast or if we're talking about, Twitter or any other kind of live streaming. In this case, ABC settled out of court. So this surviving psychic walked away with over $900,000.
Yeah, I mean, the lines are so blurred right now, and I know that, as a generation, we're many, many years into, reality TV being a very influential thing.
Yes.
I don't know if, I don't watch much TV anymore, so I don't know how strong the pull of reality TV is now. But I know, over the past 10, 15, 20 years, it's been pretty darn strong. Then you've got the potent platform that is social media, and the idea of network effect, and how something may seem so anonymous in the beginning, and you put it out there because, I don't know, I only have 40 followers. There's no harm. This is a cool, funny story, but that can completely blow up. Like somebody in this case was doxxed. And,
yes.
that can happen. That can be kind of a side effect that you didn't see, you didn't think about when you first kind of went down this road. Is there any legal recourse for someone who is like on the other side, like say the two people, and I realize the guy in this situation went on to go on to Good Morning America. He made a big public splash of himself, but it was the woman in this situation that wanted to be kept relatively anonymous, and I think she was doxxed. Does she have any legal recourse about the fact that this person tweeted this out and it led to that?
Okay, let's talk about unsocial media. Here's another form of invasion of privacy. We were talking about intrusion into seclusion. Now let's talk about private facts. Let's say that the people on the plane were talking and they got into some very private, embarrassing information, maybe some medical information. Maybe one person is saying, I'm married, but I'm going to dump my spouse who doesn't know it yet, whatever. Under the private facts invasion of privacy, there are two questions that are asked. The first one is actually a two-parter, and that is, would this information be highly offensive to a reasonable person? If you're super sensitive, the courts say get a thicker skin, and if it's just mildly offensive, again, get over it. But there's also a second question, and that's this. Is what is being disseminated newsworthy? That means, is it of legitimate public concern? If it's of legitimate public concern, you can disseminate it even if it would be highly offensive to a reasonable person. But now if you have a couple of private people talking about a private matter that is highly offensive to a reasonable person, then that is not newsworthy, and that's private facts invasion of privacy. Now, if the people sitting on the plane are famous, maybe they're politicians, it might be that what they're saying would be highly offensive to a reasonable person, but yet it is still of legitimate public concern. And then the law would say it's all right to disseminate it.
Has the law really caught up with the way we see fame right now? Because I think that, from what I understand, is they found this woman because they knew it was a professional, some sort of professional soccer player who she was talking to.
Yes,
but
yes.
I mean, there are live streamers. I mean, there's us, there's all kinds of people. What is famous, and has the law caught up to what that means? I mean, just because I know that, live streamers, people show up at their house, or, it's much easier for a man to live stream than it is often for a woman, because it's, a sense of safety, because it's so easy to find people.
Yes.
What has the law caught up with what it means to be famous?
Well, there has been a problem with that for a long time, and it's developed with libel law, the concept that if you are a public figure, then you would have to prove actual malice, meaning intentional libel to be able to collect. If you're a private individual, if you can say that somebody was negligent, they weren't using a standard of care that a reasonable person would use in similar circumstances, then you're okay. So the stakes are really great. Are you a public figure or are you a private individual? And the Supreme Court started talking in terms of, do you have pervasive fame or notoriety? And the court first started in talking about pervasive fame or notoriety in the community, and then a few years later kind of mucked it up by saying, well, in the community, if it's just like, Palm Beach society, that's not enough. This was in a case involving a splashy divorce for the Firestone tire heir. The Supreme Court keeps on chipping away at who would be a public figure. For instance, if you are a criminal, and I hope you're not, I hope this is just academic, but you would not be a public figure for purposes of commenting on your crime. What you have to do is thrust yourself into the vortex of a public issue, basically. So what constitutes thrusting? If you decide, for instance, that you're going to campaign on an issue, maybe you're a vegetarian or whatever, and then the court might say you're a public figure for purposes of commenting on the vegetarian aspect of your life, but not for other aspects of your life. So if somebody said, okay, you purported vegetarian, you have fur coats well, I have a lot of fur coats, but they're occupied. Okay, dogs and guinea pigs. Anyway, for the purpose of talking about the issue you've injected yourself into, then you are public. For all other purposes, you're private. But if you are, say, Beyonce, you've arrived. Oprah, you've arrived. You are a public person for all circumstances. So your conversation on a plane would probably be of public interest.
One of the questions that I have around this and kind of the legal lines that it seems to straddle is whether it was wrong for this to have been posted at all, or whether it was wrong that once it was posted, it got so much attention. Like if somebody had posted this and it had gone to 40 people and it had never made the news, would there still be a similar, thread of guilt there, or a similar rule that was being broken in that regard? I don't know. And is there any legal, like from a legal standpoint, people who retweet or get involved in that, sense? What kind of blame do they share in this?
All right, let's talk about 40 versus 40 million. What you can be talking about is the degree of damages, which of course the jury will be awarding. And then when it comes to republication of the material, it again kind of depends on who you are if you're going to have liability. Let's say that you are an internet service provider and somebody is posting this kind of stuff on your service. The Congress has given protection. It's called Section 230 protection under the Communications Decency Act. You're protected. You don't have liability for what third parties are doing. But, of course, you do have liability for what you yourself do. Mm-hmm. So a republication, a retweeting, or whatever, yes, you're disseminating it too.
But Twitter itself has no legal responsibility in this.
Well, as long as you are a service provider, no. As long as you're not engaged in sex trafficking, because mm-hmm. Congress made just a recent little amendment to that law. Mm-hmm.
Well, I could keep asking you questions all night, but thank you so much for joining us. And I assume that your dogs are wearing their own fur coats and your guinea pigs are wearing their own fur coats, and not vice versa, right?
That's okay. Right. And we have a very segregated household. Okay. The dogs could not get around the guinea pigs.
Okay.
Because, yes.
Dr. Sandra Davidson, thank you so much. Where's the best place for people to follow your work online?
Well, I do a weekly column. So if you would just go to Sandy Davidson and also put Columbia, Missourian, that would get my columns.
Okay. We'll put that link in our show notes too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.